Hello everybody, my name is Walnut, and I am back today with another amazing StarCraft 2 cast. Today we have a Platinum PVT on the map Coda LE. As we finish loading into this game, I'd like to say, oh my god, first of all that I didn't change my overlay, which is no big deal, but I also wanted to say that I have purchased a new microphone and I should sound significantly better now. So anyway, let's get on with the cast. Both players being incredibly well mannered with their GLHFs, and as we get further into this game, I'd like to see what sort of gas timings both players go for, as gas timings will decide the possibilities of this game. Double gas opening from our Protoss player will mean something along the lines of either a proxy Stargate or proxy DT tech, whereas a gas first for our Terran player will always result in a fast factory into fast starport and possibly fast banshees. That's the typical build in TVT, but I've also seen it at a PVT-ish matchup, simply because the banshee is sometimes unexpected, sometimes doesn't go exactly the way you want it, but other times it does as you catch your opponent off guard. Now we see our Protoss player moving out for the scout here. It will be a barracks first out of our Terran player. No gas shenanigans going on this time. This is a pretty standard map. This is the equivalent of Overgrowth in the last map pool. Overgrowth being incredibly standard, being played in GSL for over a year now. Well, I guess it's actually been exactly, well, okay, it's a little over a year now. Probe being super annoying, harassing that SCV. We see normal gas timings here out of the Terran player, and the probe, of course, scouts everything. Looks like it is going to be a 15 double gas, 16 gas pylon. This is weird. 16 gas pylon out of our Protoss player. This is a very late gas, meaning he's going for some sort of very weird tech that I'm not aware of. This means that his warp gate research will be incredibly late. Well, it'll be on time, but all of his tech afterwards will be fairly late. It's generally up to the Protoss to decide the momentum of the game in the early game, as they can go for things like Proxy Oracle and other cute little builds like that, whereas when it transitions into the mid game, it's generally on the Terran player's shoulders, as they have to do things like drops and other sorts of shenanigans. Looks like our Protoss player is going for that one gate expand, which we see so commonly. He should cancel this Zealot when he doesn't see an eBay block and allow 400 minerals exactly when he needs to. Does cancel the Zealot and starts up the Nexus. CC starting up for a Terran player, so it's very similar timings between the two players. The Reaper is just about to pop out now from our Terran player, and he should be able to pick off this probe here at the Watchtower, which is going to be pretty sad, but you know, he'll get over it. So an eBay going down for our Terran player. He's suspecting some sort of cheeky play, but we're not going to see that for a little while here. Just regular Stalker, Mothership Core on the way for our Protoss player, and nothing really out of the ordinary for him. Throws on his second gas, and it looks like he's just going to macro up from here. Our Terran player throws on a second barracks, which interests me greatly, because this means that he's going for some sort of early aggression. Maybe not the most standard of early aggressions. Actually pulling all of the probes off the line here to deal with the Reaper. Reaper gets one probe kill. Probes are still being pulled, and the Reaper is at about half HP, and it's not going to die anytime. Ooh, very close one. 1 HP on that Reaper. Very close. Alright, standard stuff here out of the Terran player. Not going for too much gas. No factory out of him quite yet. Reaper will scoot on back, potentially home. Yeah, okay, third barracks really solidifies it. This is going to be a 3 barracks timing at around the 10-minute mark, which is standard as Terran builds go. Mothership Core moving out for the scout right about now, which again is very standard. Protoss player will be mining off of his natural base for slightly longer than the Terran player, as he has to morph his into a orbital command, then land it down on the low ground over here. Now, this isn't a very big advantage, but it can lead to some minor advantages, especially in the pro scene, where certain things like every mineral counts because of how efficient players play. I want to watch. Careful, Mothership Core. Mothership Core is not going to recall in time. Will get picked off. That is a 100 gas loss for the Protoss player, as well as a significant energy loss on the Mothership Core. And that is going to be very, very sad for him, because he's going to need that with the upcoming barracks timing that the Terran player is looking to execute. Factory starts up at a semi-normal time. By the time this is done, he will be able to build a starport, and then he will build medevacs from there. Actually, not even moving out to take his expansion right now. This interests me a little bit. He's got to be thinking some sort of gateway timing, but there's nothing. Okay, he does move it out now. As I was saying before, though, I'm interested to see how these players' macro sort of pans out, because as it stands, one of the biggest things that keeps plat players in plat is their sort of less than optimal macro. I'll call it that. We'll euphemize as much as possible here. But it really comes down to the fact that their macro isn't always the best. As we see, if we look at the resource counts right now, the Protoss player is not maxed out army supply wise. He has plenty of supply to work with, about 20 supply, and he's still floating a large amount of gas and resources. Now, if we look over at the Protoss player's base, he's actually going in extremely fast Templar archives. This is a style that has severely fallen out of favor in recent times, as with the Widowmine buffs, they've been significantly less good, as despite having the charge lot wall, the armor of the Zealots does not even matter against the spell damage of the Widowmines. This means that the Terran force can kite back essentially forever against these storms and all that sort of good thing, and that equates to a very, very sad Protoss player because he can't land any good storms. Now, stim will be done around 10 minutes here. If we look at that, yeah, approximately 10 minutes. And this lines up perfectly with the 2 medevac timing. Has plenty of bioforces, plenty of economy to back this up. Factory will be moving out for the scout, as is standard in this matchup. Storm is on the way, as well as a forge. He should be going for the armor upgrades with Storm, as attack upgrades don't affect spell damage, similarly to armor upgrades. We actually see the Terran player playing extremely safe here, maybe gaining all in last game or something like that, but he doesn't need to be quite this safe. Now, I want to note that the Robo's actually very late in this build right now. Storm will be done potentially by the time this push hits, if the Protoss player can delay a little bit longer. The reason I'm saying the Robo is a little bit late is generally you get the Robo first along with the Twilight Council, and then you also get your Forge, so you get very fast upgrades, and then when the Robo finishes, you throw on like 5 observers, so you're always safe against everything. And then you throw in the Twilight and get Storm. The Robo also helps feign Colossus, which is pretty good. Now, Combat Shields and Stim will be finishing up right now as this push is about to hit, but it's important to note that Storm is also done. There's one Storm between these two Templars, and another Storm will be ready in a few seconds. Needs to have excellent force fields, though, to get these to go well, because the Terran player, he's got Stim. If the force fields aren't good, he can just Stim and run back and heal up with his medevacs, and he'll be having a jolly old day. Maybe a little bit confused as to what the tech path is, but not too worse for wear. Just more gateways and standard stuff being added on by our Protoss player. He, of course, is throwing on a heavy amount of Zealots, going for that armor upgrade like I suggested. Beautiful Storm there on the Bioforces. Takes out most of them. Two Storms, actually. There's only a small contingent of these forces left, and with only energy for units, he's pulled ahead and the units lost, meaning that this is a perfect opportunity for him to move out. There's a significant tech advantage having Storm against no ghosts, and these Stalkers will push these medevacs back. Zealots will start to scoot forward here, chase down the Marines. Third base actually being taken by our Terran player. He's going to have to defend this somehow, but it seems like he doesn't have the units quite yet. Not against Storm. I don't know, though. He can't pull up and lift this off, unfortunately, because it is a planetary fortress. But that also means that the Protoss player cannot pressure that. He cannot aggress this base, simply because planetary fortresses are ridiculous. They're really, really good, guys, I promise. Either way, we see our standard upgrades coming out of our Terran player. He does have double eBay, so he will be getting upgrades significantly faster than our Protoss player. He's already 1-0 on the upgrades, and our Terran player is at 1-1. Now it's interesting to note the third base options of both of these two players. This should lead to a very aggression-focused game, as really you want to be okay. Well, this is probably the better third base against Terran, as it helps to defend against drops. And you also can't get flanked so much on this area, because if a drop comes in here, it can only go into your main or your third base, and if a drop comes in here, it can only come into your natural, and your army's going to be sitting right about here. So as long as it's not going into your main, you have pretty easy access to it. Just have double prong drops coming out from our Terran player. The Protoss player does have these in vision, but it's a toss-up as to whether he's actually spotted these medevacs. He has spotted the one in the main base, but did he spot the one in the natural? This medevac is very low HP. Lots of damage being dealt so far. A few stalkers getting picked off by some marauders in the main base. Zealots being warped in the natural, but marauders are dealing with these pretty well. They have concussive shells, actually loading up into the medevac and picking up and leaving. I feel like he could have actually stayed a little bit longer, but there were 9 probes lost in that drop, and the number is ever rising. We're at 13, 14, and so far there's not a good enough answer to this. The units are starting to be worked in, and they do clean this up, but that's 16 workers lost to 2 very well executed drops. Now, our Terran player is just turtling up on his 3 base, adding on plenty of production structures, managing his macro okay. I normally don't like to see this much of resources build up, considering he's not supply capped right now. He's not at the supply limit. If he were, he should have been putting on aggression, but he's not quite yet, so it's okay to sit back. But he should be spending all of this money. If he has too much gas, then he should be pulling a few workers off of gas to mine something else for a time, or he should be spending his resources on things like ghosts, so that he can spend all of his gases. Ghosts are pretty gas expensive, and you don't want to be ghostless against this many High Templar. Plenty of gateways being thrown on by our Protoss player, and another drop looking to head into the main base. The observer is actually slightly out of range, so he's going to have a hard time spotting this drop, and it could do potentially a significant amount more damage. It is important to note that there is a photon overcharge and a second one in a couple of seconds here. Double drop moving out into the natural area potentially from our Terran player, and he looks like in an incredible position to hold this sort of, or to deal a lot of damage. Now this also means he's left his third base a little bit bare bones, and the Protoss player is beginning to move out. But if he gets dropped at the same time, there's no guarantee. Alright, he drops the third base. Good feedback on the medevac. Terran forces stim forward to pick off a High Templar. They get 1. Will they get 2? Focus fire is not quite good enough. Does not bring down 2, but does get 1. Another drop in the natural. This is the double drop. Dealing with the Nexus of all things. May actually kill the Nexus if he focus fires it down. And the Nexus is falling lower and lower, but the stimmed units are starting to lose a little bit of steam. They do pick off the Nexus. Protoss army is back to defend, but the damage is dealt, and the Terran picks up, boosts out, and is able to leave. Begins dropping units in the main base, but I'd like to see him just sort of... Alright, the medevac full of units does get picked off, and the other one is forced to leave. Excuse me. But the Terran forces are looking to move out on the middle of the map. The Protoss player does scout this, but he's nowhere near his third base. He's pulled his whole army out of position to deal with the drops in the natural, yeah. And the Colossus gets picked off, no range on that. And the Terran player, will he have enough? It looks like he might. Zealots charging forward, and the force fields are very, very good. Terran is forced to back up, hold out for a little bit longer, mass up a bit more of an army. He loads up into his medevacs and moves out for the drop. Needs to be careful with these Vikings. Doesn't want to leave him in the middle of the map for too long, else they might get picked off by these pesky little Archons and Stalkers. The dual drop is going to head out shortly, but we also see a 4th command center done and idle here for our Platinum player. Excuse me, sorry, I just like mind blanked there really hard for a Platinum Terran player. Now, this command center has been done for a little while, and it hasn't been mined from. This is bleeding out the sort of advantage that our Terran player had. because he did have a superior economy getting that fifth base faster, or that fourth base faster. Alright, Nexus Cannon and Blink Stalker's already ready to deal with these drops. These drops will do absolutely nothing, unfortunately, and our Terran player is going to have to think of a new way to get damage done. So far, he's prevented the fourth base from going down, as well as sniping a Nexus in the natural, which is only just now finishing up. Just a few seconds, but he's got a planetary fortress at the third base. He's got a planetary fortress at the fourth base, and he looks incredibly prepared to turtle this one out for the long haul. All of his upgrades are done, and we see the Protoss player only sitting on 2-1-1. It interests me that he's getting the shield upgrades. Normally we don't see that, but I suppose since he has so many Archons, this could be a pretty big point of contention. There's a pylon going down near the third base. Ooh, excuse me, there's a drop going on in the natural. Not a whole lot here to deal with this, drawing the whole army back from the natural, but it turns around just in time. Few units heading towards the third base. Big army here from the Protoss player. Not very many ghosts out of the Terran, in fact, none. Beautiful storms out of the Protoss player, and the Terran is forced back yet again. He really needs to get some sort of units to deal with the High Templar, whether it be ghosts or even just some stimmed forward Marines or something, but so far he's got absolutely nothing here to deal with the High Templar, and it's really costing him. He can't engage into Storm, and he simply doesn't have the Viking count to kill the Colossus either. He did almost pick off the Nexus at the natural, but just the right amount of units were pulled off to defend that, so it's no big deal. He got out just fine. Double Colossus production, actually. And Colossus range not done yet. A bit of a blunder by our Protoss player, as Colossus range is really the upgrade you want to get. I want to note also that the saturation by both players has been not particularly fantastic this game. If we look at the saturation in the main base, obviously this is fine. In the natural, he's got 8 workers on these couple of mineral patches, when they all could be here on these 8 mineral patches that have literally thousands of resources left. In the Protoss' base, he's got 29 workers on his natural base that's almost mined out, and 21 on his third base. Now, this is extremely inefficient supply-wise. Alright, we're going to have an engagement pretty soon. Terran player walks up. He's got beautiful storms out of the Protoss player. He's got a few SCVs with his army to help try and buffer for the storms, but I don't think it's going to help that much. Splits are very good. He's got a very nice concave at the bottom of this ramp. Protoss player throws down a few more storms. Beautiful storms, dealing a lot of damage to the bio. Splits are pretty good, though, dealing with a lot of the gateway forces on the ground. Re-stims up his army, moves back forward, but I feel like the Colossus are just too much. There's 3 Colossus and nothing to deal with them, just a handful of bio forces left over. And he has to cut his losses yet again and move back to his third base, try and get up what he can. The one advantage he does have going for him, though, is that he has plenty of economy behind this. His saturation, while not optimal, does leave him with 2 fully mining bases, sort of, against the 1.5 of the Protoss. Okay, I guess it's 1.5 for both of them. The Protoss is trying to take a 4th base now, but that can be easily denied by a couple of drops. 2 drops heading into the main now. While there is an observer to spot this, there are already beautifully placed Blink Stalkers in the main to deal with this. Unfortunately, though, they are not able to pick off the medevacs, so the Marauders will be able to just pick up and leave at whim. Needs to be careful with the medevacs, though. Does lose 1, very low HP. Very sloppy here. 2 Colossus getting picked off nearly for free by the Bioforces. This could be a very big advantage, as the army supply is starting to swing into the Terran player's favor. It's not quite there yet, but he's got the economy to back it up and continue to produce a very heavy amount of units. Big force of Zealots and DTs heading into the third base here, but with the missile turret and the planetary fortress. Alright, does start to focus down the missile turret. That goes down very, very quickly. Is starting to focus down the planetary. Planetary will get a scan thrown down on it and is trying to focus down these DTs, but the DT splits were pretty good. DTs will not be able to kill this off with the repairs, but it was a very scary force that did assault that third base. Puts a little bit of fear into the Terran player. Terran does start busting down these rocks, looking to pressure one of the bases of the Protoss. More DTs being thrown into the third base. This is a very good play, forcing out the scans of the Terran player as much as possible, keeping him distracted at home so the Protoss can get up the economy that he wants to. There's a medevac just sitting here. This is pretty cute. I like that medevac. I dig it. Terran forces, though, stimming into the fourth base of the Protoss army. There's no Protoss here, and he's going to snipe the Nexus and be able to pick up and leave no problem. Probes transferring over. A couple of probes do get picked off. Lots of zealots here to try and push this back. Terran cuts his losses, and by losses I mean advantages, and gets out of there essentially scot-free, not losing anything. Does have a very limpy Viking there, but, you know, other than that, he should be fine. Protoss does look to move out now. He's got a pretty sizable force, and there's still no ghosts in the Protoss army. This could be the engagement that ends the game. There is nowhere to run for the Terran player. He stems up, takes a ton of his damage on his bio forces to try and get back to the third base. Protoss player delays a little bit, but starts to walk forward. Colossus dealing a lot of damage, zoning out the Terran player as much as possible. Beautiful storms all over the bio. There's just not quite enough here for our Terran player. Does not have any ghosts to deal with the storms. Does not have any army supply really to speak of. Just a few units trickling in, trying to deal with this. Actually dealing a bit more damage than I expected to the gateway forces. Fortunately, this Archon dealing a lot of damage, being very tanky with its very good upgrades. Don't see shield upgrades too often. There's a small bioforce running into the third base now of the Protoss player, but if that army supply had been with the actual army, who knows what he could have done. Maybe he could have picked off a few more units, and these bioforces will get cleaned up. The entire third base here of the Terran player has been completely ransacked, and there's not a whole lot left over for him. He does take another base over in the top right-hand corner, but I don't know if that's going to be enough. He simply doesn't have the right army composition, to deal with the army at hand. Pulls off SCVs, and he looks to take this engagement. Oh, no, never mind. He's pulling them over to the 5th-ish base, sort of. Now, one thing I want to note yet again, 5,000 gas in the bank for a Terran player, 2,000 minerals in the bank for a Protoss player. If the Protoss player were trading armies here, alright, Vikings do not get one of the Colossus quite yet. Bio stems back, starts kiting the Marines. Beautiful storms all over the Vikings and the Bio. Hard to tell quite how much damage is taken on the Bio there, but storms are pretty good. A couple of wasted ones, but very, very good damage all over the army. Now, if the Protoss player had spent all of this money on units and was maxed out right now, he could trade armies and then remax his army and then trade again and again with the Terran player until he bleeds out in minerals and gas. He won't be bleeding out in gas anytime soon with 5,000 gas, but he will bleed out in minerals extremely shortly, as his income is not really been getting started until just now. Again, just minor inefficiencies by these players, which is expected at this level of play. Terran forces stimming around. There is actually a 5th base being taken by the Protoss player in an extremely aggressive position. He is in position in this 3rd base area, though, to push back this force. Bio does run forward, but there is slightly too much Protoss there. This is a scary engagement to take. Too much charge lot, too much storm. There's honestly been very, very good positioning on these High Templars by the Protoss player. Little run by of zealots into the 4th base, but there are planetary fortresses here, or one planetary fortress singular there, so that will do not a whole lot of damage. As I was saying though, the Protoss player has had very good positioning on his High Templar, always having them in the front of the army to zone out the Bio forces. Bio will still stim forward, try and pick off this Nexus as quickly as possible. Nexus is instantly cancelled, and the Protoss army doesn't look to even want to engage. Tons of zealots here, about 13 zealots, all just warped in that left-hand position. Will look to kill some of the production facilities of the Terran player. Terran is forced back to have to deal with this, and that allows Protoss to get a bit more map position, which is exactly what he wants. Terran player looks to have been hiding like half of his army in his main base. Has plenty of forces now. Has one more engagement in him, I think. Lots of Vikings being picked off by 2 very good zoning storms there. And unfortunately, even with the high Marauder count this army has, Marauders aren't the best against Zealots. You generally want those against high Stalker compositions, and this isn't a very high Stalker composition. The Bio player is looking to stim around the map, sort of find what damage he can, but the Protoss is looking to do damage too. He brings a Warp Prism into the main. We'll start warping in units there. A couple of Zealots already. Wait, are these? No, those are Zealots. Alright. I would have liked to see him maybe do some DTs, as those would have worked maybe better, as it would have forced out scans as well. But it looks like there is plenty of Bio there to help deal with that. Terran player is ahead an army supply now and looks to pick off the Protoss player's 4th base. Will snipe it for the 2nd time this game. Alright, there is plenty of Terran here to even take this engagement if he wanted to, but he is going to take that damage and run. He should be fine here. Maybe wants to load up into... Okay, these medevacs are really low HP though. I would honestly quite like it if the Terran player would repair those. A little bit of a corner snipe there, as Snoot would say, picking off a few of the units as they were running around that little ramp there. I would very much like the Terran player to repair these though, as they are very low HP. He's not necessarily building a whole lot more medevacs, and he needs these ones to last as long as they possibly can. He will pick up and head into the main base though, presumably. Huge zealot run by heading into the 4th base of the Terran player. Mass repair goes down on that, and he should be fine from this position. Protoss is sort of limping around the map though, doesn't really know where he wants to be. Lots of stalkers though picking off these low HP medevacs, and only a couple of units are getting dropped, and this isn't doing nearly as much damage as the Terran player had hoped. It was 4 full medevacs and only 1 medevac dropped any units on the ground. Now we have large mineral and gas counts for both players. As I'm saying again, this is a very important thing to note if you are looking to improve at the game, especially at the plat level. And I guarantee you, you will get to diamond if you manage your money and are never floating this many resources, especially when you're not maxed. Alright, Terran player does look to pick off the 5th base of the Protoss player. Protoss is out of position again, maybe looking to go for the base race right now. Does pick off the Nexus, picks off the pylon, and stops a lot of those zealots from warping in. Terran can get a very good flank here, but instead decides to go for the base race, looking to kill the 3rd base. I don't necessarily agree with this, as he's losing a mining base while killing a Protoss's a little bit of the structure building production. What am I saying with my life? Anyway, but he does pick off the Nexus. Unfortunately, this Nexus wasn't really mining anything. There's only a handful of gas left on these geysers, no mineral patches left over, and the Protoss looks to maybe kill the 6th base, or excuse me, the 5th base of the Terran player. Man, I just can't get my numbers right today. Terran will move into the natural of the Protoss player, but he's overstimmed his units. A lot of these Marines and Marauders are getting very low on HP. Many of the Marines are in the red, and the majority of the Marauders are in the orange. And there's just not enough energy on these medevacs to heal up these units. We'll start killing off all of the production of the Protoss player. This is going to come down to a base race. There is no mothership core for recall for the Protoss player, so if things start to go sour in the base race, he is going to have a very bad time. But at the same time, he has taken extra bases on the map, so the Terran player is going to have a very hard time killing those. And again, he is overstimmed here. He does not have anything to heal these units up, and just a couple of Colossus volleys should be able to clean the majority of these up. The Protoss player deciding actually not to go for the main base of the Terran player, which I definitely agree with. Terran player loads up what units he can and then boosts on out, but I don't know. I feel like there's just not enough here. He doesn't have the infrastructure. He could move these CCs to different bases and start mining those, but despite the army supplies being in favor of the Terran, he has no way to replace the rest of his armies, whereas the Protoss player, while not mining a whole lot, is still mining. He can throw on plenty of High Templar with that gas count, and there's still no ghosts on the map. And I think this is one of the biggest problems that this Terran player has had, is he has never had any ghosts to deal with the Archons, he's never had any ghosts to deal with the High Templar, and now engaging with only half of the army, splitting very nicely, but it's just not enough against the high Colossus counts, the high Storm counts, and the very well upgraded Gateway forces. And that looks like it will be it for this game. Terran player is literally not mining, has significantly less army supply, and will GG out here fairly shortly. There is nothing left for this man that can save him the game. Not with this many structures. Protoss can demolish him. Well, unless he lifts up structures and is really cheesy like that. I like that the production tab is completely empty here. That feels pretty good. Either way, just a couple of Vikings trying to deal with the Colossus, but really, as long as the Protoss player plays this out even decently well, he should be completely fine in taking the space race and winning the game. Bunch of chrono boost going down on the gateways. He does still have his Twilight Council, so he can make Archons, all of that sort of thing. These are pretty high energy medevacs though, and with a bunch of Zealots being warped in, these just handful of Marauders can't really do a whole lot against the Zealots. Protoss player still sort of mind sweeping this base here of the Terran player, and honestly, let's be real here, this game is over. There's nothing left here. Terran player sees that, GG's out, and a wonderful game here by both players. Our Terran player played very well, doing some very nice drop play, multi-pronged drop, doing everything right to draw the Protoss player out of position, but unfortunately his economy was not quite there, his engagements were not quite there, and his unit composition was not quite there. My name is Walnut. Be sure to follow my stream at twitch.tv/Anthony356. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I will see you guys next time with another replay cast. See you guys next time.